Hi, and thanks for being with us. I'm Bill Quinn. Todd Wood is on assignment this afternoon. He will rejoin us for the skiff tomorrow morning between 10 and 12, and we'll have more on that toward later in the show. So we appreciate you being here with us today. We've had lots of folks following us, lots of feedback since we aired the president's address and gave our commentary and thoughts about the content of that about just over 72 hours ago. And so it's been a hectic few days as we try to put the pieces together and also keep track of the reaction by the fake media and others to the president's address. It has been fascinating and very much as we had foretold that it might be. So, one of the themes today is this. We have had the evidence all along, especially here in Georgia. So who's been blocking it? That is going to be a key question and will, unfortunately, we believe, cause folks to have to suffer through some truths that are going to be difficult to accept. And we may be battling folks that we thought were employed to help America, and in fact, they are working against us. One of the folks that we have tracked and followed is Catherine Herridge. And Ms. Herridge had some thoughts following the speech that we wanted to share. We think they're right on point, and she took us through some of her observations just following the president's address. Here you go.
First, just your reaction to the president's announcement tonight.
Well, I think it's a very significant announcement, not only what he said, but the fact that they are releasing these documents so that we can really fact check the claims we heard this evening. I've been digging into the documents already, and I found this November 2020 email. And it specifically states, it's a conversation among intelligence officials. It specifically states that they have, quote, deliberately massaged one of our pending PDBs, that's the president's daily brief, to avoid any direct links to the election. And that is consistent with my reporting. I understand the whistleblower complaint alleged, and I think we're now seeing it in the emails, that there was an intentional effort to suppress intelligence about China's influence operations. And this was, Katie, like a massive effort, what they call a multi-domain operation. That means trade, it means diplomacy, it means open source information, it means social media. So all the levers of power China had to influence the U.S. elections.
In your reporting, you've said that a senior intelligence official emphasized to you that in 2020, China was not held to the same standard as Russia and other adversaries, including North Korea, Iran, and proxies like Hezbollah, and that the Chinese influence operations were consistently downplayed while Russia's were routinely amplified. You also talked about this whistleblower who was reportedly retaliated against for trying to bring this information to light.
So in the summer of 2020, as we're heading into the election, in the intelligence community, there were indicators of this Chinese influence operation. Influence operations means that you're trying to affect the outcome of how people vote or their sentiment about a presidential candidate. It's different than an interference operation, which is penetrating voting rolls and voter systems. And this whistleblower was raising the alarm about the influence operation, and then suddenly it all was suppressed. My understanding is that some of their reports, there were in officials' own handwriting that they wanted everything out that could help President Trump in his reelection. So there was clear evidence of political and personal bias, and intelligence is supposed to be neutral. So what we heard tonight from the president is an allegation that this intelligence was suppressed in order to harm him, and now we're seeing documents already which back up those claims.
What we just heard was that the CIA was doing everything possible.
So, this notion of suppression, finding ways to take information and keep it from becoming broader, keep it from being known, you're going to see crop up again and again and again. It was very interesting that earlier today, a Twitter account that has 350,000 followers posted this, and they talk about, among other things, Dominion voting machines, but then the notion of a company called Connick out of Michigan. Connick, as you may recall, was identified by True the Vote as an organization led by Eugene Yu, and they were storing information on servers which were then found to reside on the Unicom network within China itself. Now, understand and recall that China considers anything on their network to be their property. So when you store information on it, essentially it is automatically becoming their property. And it appears and was reported at that time that nearly 2 million election workers had their information and information in some cases about their polling places taken and stored on those servers. They also called out some testimony that I gave to the state election board at that time that called out the continued, we'll call it suppression by the state election board to address many of these things. And we talked specifically about Connick. We're going to come back to that in a couple of minutes, but we wanted to begin talking about things that have been out there. As we said, we have had this information all along, going back now years, and especially here in Georgia, that's been particularly true. I did work along with others back in the 21-22 timeframe to try to uncover what might have happened. And we began looking at the things like voter rolls and what are called cast vote records. We're going to talk about that because in some cases, some of the counties here in Georgia attempted to avoid providing those cast vote records to researchers like myself and claimed that they didn't have them. Well, it turns out that cast vote records are nothing more than a report. It can be generated within seconds to just a few minutes from the EMS servers that reside in each of the counties in Georgia that are part of the Dominion election voting systems. And what they can produce is this. Looks like a spreadsheet. It can be easily maneuvered in Excel, for example, and you can begin analyzing what it shows. We're going to talk about specifically what it showed when we finally got these beginning to be delivered to us. This one happens to be from my home county, Forsyth County, and it was delivered after a request. And so we were able to then begin looking through it and trying to discern what it showed. We're going to spend a few minutes and go through this because one county tells you one thing, but what if what it indicates goes beyond any one county? We're going to show that. So as you go through this, you can use various research and analysis techniques available within Excel to take these. And the way that this spreadsheet works is each line item is in fact one ballot. And as you read across, it shows you all the information about that ballot, where it was cast, which tabulator it ran through in order to assemble its contents of that ballot. And then it lists each of the races going off to the right. It's actually quite a lengthy spreadsheet. And for each of the races, it will show where a vote was cast for one of the given candidates. Taking all of that, you can then stretch these ballots out in a chart, and you can look at what they indicated as they were totaled up. Now, we'll explain this one so that you can see what you're looking at. As you total those ballots up, and this is again the cast vote record for Forsyth County. We've had this now in our possession since late 21, early 22. It showed that for Election Day and early in-person voting, why is that important? Well, we'll show you in just a moment why that's important. There's 4 ways to cast votes in Georgia. You can cast them on Election Day. You can cast them early in person. And you also have 2 other methods, which we'll cover in just a moment. When you look at Election Day and early in-person voting, what you see is that once votes began to be added up, President Trump received about 73%, 72.55 to be exact. And it was actually quite consistent, even more consistent as more and more and more votes were tabulated. So in this case, what that chart shows is the first 99,000 ballots which were tabulated in Forsyth County for the 2020 election. The last 30,000 or so, 30,900 ballots showed something different. Why would that possibly be? We already talked to you about the fact that those first ballots, the first 99,000, were election day and early in-person voting. What about the last 30,000? What were they? Well, they were mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots. This is going to become more important as we look at what happened both here and outside Georgia in just a couple of minutes. Why were they different? Well, that's an open question, but those mail-in ballots had a different profile. Trump, in fact, got significantly less of the percentage of votes, 47 in this case, versus Biden getting over 50. And we'll look again at this. This is another way of looking at the same data, and it simply looks at the 4 ways that people can vote: absentee by mail, advance voting, or also known as early in person, election day, and provisional. Provisional ballots typically are very few. It's only when there's some reason why someone has to fill one out in the polling place that's in a different form. But look very carefully at the outcomes. Absentee by mail had a different ratio of votes for this county for the 2020 election, and that was that last 30,000 or so votes. Why would that be different? These people came from the same locations. They came from the same precincts. They overlapped other neighborhoods. They overlapped other parts of the population. Why would absentee votes be so different? And in fact, they're significantly different, 24% different than advance voting or early in person and election day voting. There is something known as the law of large numbers, and you've heard this spoken of before. Professor David Clemens spoke of it in one of his latest podcasts just recently. And what it says is, when you begin dealing with numbers of 10,000, 20,000, in this case, 130,000 votes, the impact of changes begins to be smoothed out. It's very unusual to see significant ratio changes as you deal with bigger and bigger portions of the number. So this is 130,000 votes. Why would that portion be so different? Well, we'll look at that in a couple of minutes. So one question is, was that the only race where this occurred? The answer is no. In the same county, in Forsyth County, in Loeffler versus Warnock, look at the ratio, again, between advance voting for Warnock, election day voting for Warnock, and absentee. Now, keep in mind, in this case, you've got 3 folks potentially receiving votes. So Loeffler and Collins shared the difference. Warnock, you can see the difference. And again, it's, believe it or not, it's 23 to 24% different. Is that a coincidence? We doubt it. Especially now, we doubt it. What about other counties? Well, this was just Forsyth, right? So this couldn't have happened in other counties. Well, indeed, it did. Here's Hall County, same period, 2020 election, presidential race, and look at the absentee by mail ballot count. Again, the ratios. Trump is significantly less in absentee by mail. Biden is significantly higher. What about Paulding County? Oh, goodness. Again, a 24, in this case, a little over 24% difference between the various styles of voting. Trump got, again, between 69 and 72% for advance voting and election day, close to what we saw in Forsyth County. And yet for mail-in, he got 47%. It dropped by, again, the same 24%. Gwinnett County, again, big difference between absentee by mail and election day and advance voting. Cobb County, same thing, very similar. Fayette County, and in fact, for each county, and we had reviewed at that time about 15 counties in Georgia, you see these same differences. Now, were they all exactly 24%? No, they were slightly different in various counties. We don't know why that would be. It probably had anomalies to do with the way that this was being done. So the question is, what could explain this across especially multiple counties? Well, now we begin to go back and hear what other people have found, not just here in Georgia, but elsewhere. Let's listen to this from Michigan.
That were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties use this same software in the same capacity. Antrim County had to hand count all of the ballots, and these counties that use this software need to closely examine their results for similar discrepancies. The people of Michigan deserve a transparent and open process.
Okay, so here, that's an example of they're spotting a change within the processing of the election. Was this part of the election system and software? You've heard us report about the fact that software originally designed and made by Chavez and the Cartel de las Solas was ported from Smartmatic to Sequoia to Dominion, and now Dominion is known as Liberty Voting. So was this the way this was done? Well, it might be. It could be based on what we've learned so far. What other mechanisms might exist? Well, here's a lady who testifies to seeing sequential mail-in physical ballots going in front of her during the election process itself. Let's listen to this.
Down the ballot numbers and the last names of the person of the ballot that had the name on the ballot, they were all in sequence. These are absentee ballots, mail-in ballots. They cannot be in sequence. 2232 cannot have 2233 next to it, because if they're mailed in, they come in all different numbers. And when I started noticing that these numbers are almost next to each other, like one or the other was in the middle, but then they were almost next to each other, my antennas went up. That's exactly when I thought something is not right here. Then I asked the supervisor. There was not even a date on those envelopes. It said November 0-2020. There was no second number there. Then I said, what is the date on this one? Then they got really mad at me. They said, you're not letting us do our job. You're disturbing us. And at that point, because we really don't want to be kicked out, so we were just kind of.
Okay, so what she was describing was seeing mail-in ballots going through the process, yet they were in sequential order in some cases, which of course could not be, since mail-in ballots would have been mailed out to voters, mailed back in at some point. It would not be received back in sequential order. And so was that some other mechanism? Was that some sort of stuffing that could have accounted for this? Well, it could, theoretically. Just imagine in that example we gave of Forsyth County, if you added, say, 12,000 or so votes for Biden, would that change the ratio of votes between Trump and Biden for that mail-in category? Yes, it probably could. Would that be the exact number? We don't know. But you could walk backwards and probably do the analysis. And eventually we likely will know what was done. Here's a very interesting thing. We talk about this notion of ballot stuffing. Well, that can be accomplished both by an NGO or could be accomplished by just somebody driving up with a whole bunch of ballots. Here's CNN reporting on voting, and they happen to watch a woman taking multiple ballots into a mail or a drop box while they are filming their report.
Hogan County, Ohio. You can see this woman right here casting her vote. Did you vote for Reagan or Jimmy Carter? Carter, okay. We don't want to get too personal with people here, but you can see there's actually a traffic.
Very interesting. That sounds like that was probably an earlier election, but the point is, these things can be happening. Here's a leader of an NGO, actually here in Georgia, who testifies to how they go about getting people to surrender their votes, and then they can deal with them.
Here was the counting of the ballots at the dome. It was all counting the ballots, and they told them that it was a leak on the opposite side of the dome. Everybody needed to evacuate. So then when they all left, the Democrats went back in and started counting, and the Republicans went back to the headquarters. They didn't know.
You know that for a fact?
That's what happened. Yeah.
They made it seem like nothing had, like they legitimately had leak issues.
Yeah, so they had said it was leak issues. So you see them on the video putting everything.
Here he's talking about the leak that forced voting to stop.
No, they did. They put someone put stuff up, and then you see them leave. Then they was out in the parking lot when I guess they told them they could come back in. Or they was out in the parking lot and they was gonna go back to head ballots, and they got videotape of 15 ballots from this area. You know, you go pick them all up and drop them off in the box. And, no different. I pay every week like the cameras. You just get paid like the cameras. You know, you're on the clock for however many hours, driving around, picking up absentee ballots and putting them in ballot boxes.
What information do you need to actually know that these are certain areas that have a lot of absentee ballots?
Oh, I mean, when that's the case, you would just have to have, you would either have to reach it, like if some groups was reaching out to the folks.
So this gentleman is actually describing how he would go about, or how the team would go about collecting ballots and then ending up depositing them. Were they changed in the process? Were the people incented to cast their vote a particular way? We think we'll find out as we go forward. But for the moment, it's enough to understand that there are multiple ways that the mail-in ballots could be manipulated. And it does now appear that the data associated with cast vote records and with the outcome of the election in Georgia does exhibit anomalies which would be consistent with that. Let's take a break for a moment. We want to hear from David Cross. And there's lots of folks that have their accounts with Fidelity Investments, and they may be managing those by themselves. They may be using Fidelity to do that. There may be another alternative to consider. Let's listen to this.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with US Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call US Asset Management today and put us to work for you.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
Okay. So again, the themes today are: one, what have we known and how long have we known it? And it's quite a bit. And two, who's been blocking it? Who has tried to pay no attention to it? Who has belittled it? And as we see the mainstream media and others try to do this, even with what Trump has released now, we can see that that game is continuing even today. Some years ago, the notion of Chinese gathering information on U.S. poll workers came up, thankfully, through the work of True the Vote and their team, who spotted Connick. Connick is a company out of Michigan which appeared to be storing information on servers, but the servers were actually located in China. So keep in mind, China treats things stored in servers in their environment to be their property. And this included the information on millions of poll workers, potentially voters, poll locations, and other things, and was called out all the way across the country at that time. In addition to others, I took the opportunity to speak before the state election board on several topics, including Connick. Let's listen to this.
Most concerning thing is they found this information residing on the Unicom internet backbone on a server in China. On June 3rd of this year, 2.5 months ago, the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States government released a report detailing 9 separate vulnerabilities contained in the Dominion voting systems, and these are the same systems we use all across this state. These vulnerabilities open the systems to be exploited and may be able to insert malicious code. So in other words, taking control in some ways of the systems and manipulating data that may be contained in these systems. How would that appear if this were to occur? Perhaps as anomalies in the reporting, perhaps in anomalies in the way the votes appear after the fact. I think you're aware that many people across the state have brought forward anomalies. In our last meeting, I offered to deliver to the board reports from the cast vote records from a number of counties that show unusual patterns in votes, differences in the way the votes counted up based on the method that they were used to be cast. That seems odd. So we are, on one hand, you're told to secure the elections, make sure they're accurate, and yet these machines continue to be used all across the state. And yet we have this government report that says, oh my gosh, they can be manipulated. Now, add to that something that Frank brought up just a moment ago. 7 days ago, the same company that did the investigation surrounding 2,000 mules held a meeting with over 100 people to disclose a number of pieces of information, including some things that had come up in part during their investigation. Within that, they discovered a Michigan company whose election software and apps had been sold and were in use across quite a number of counties and states in the United States. That software is said to be communicating information on 1.8 million poll workers. Their names, their children's names, finances, location, even poll location schematics of the places that polls are located and how they're put together. The most concerning thing is they found this information residing on the Unicom internet backbone on a server in China. More information's been surfacing since this first came to light about 8 days ago and has been on national broadcasts as late as last night. If you think the people in Georgia aren't paying attention to this, mistaken. Thousands upon thousands of people are watching this very closely. It's the reason that we have about 3 times as many people in the room as we've had in the past, I think. Even the machine contract itself here in Georgia runs afoul of Georgia law. It prescribes the use of non-human readable proprietary barcodes, but more importantly, allows a device that is using software or subroutines and computing, which is prohibited for an election device under OCGA 21.2-2 7.1.
Mr. Quinn, how much longer do you have? I'm being pretty generous.
Just about 30 seconds.
Great, thank you.
But I can go as long as you would like.
Well, you know, I suspected that's the case.
Okay. So here's my question. This sounds like a lot of risk to me, and it does to many of the people in Georgia. The question now falls to y'all. What are you prepared to do to mitigate this risk? The solutions are not easy, but there are ways to mitigate this. One, and I know you're not going to like it, would be to go to paper ballots and make a change so that we could be assured of valid and accurate elections.
So it was very interesting. This was in a period of time when the state election board did not have as many, I'll call it, good people sitting on their board. And in fact, just prior to this, we had found that 3 of the longstanding members of the board, their oaths couldn't be found by the state election board, by the Secretary of State, or by the governor's office. 3 longstanding members of that state election board could not find their oaths. So we'll have more on that probably as we go through. So one good example of we did that testimony. Many then and since have voiced concerns, voiced evidence, shown the problems, and yet either a combination of the state election board or its leadership or others in legislature have, I'll call it, avoided taking serious action to mitigate these risks and problems. Why is that? Well, we get a hint going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, the assembly of these cast vote records. It was theorized pretty early that there would be things found in these that would give a clue to what had happened. And there were a number of counties within Georgia who were very cooperative. You simply needed to ask for them. Sometimes you'd need to do an open records request or a FOIA style request, and they would be provided to you. However, there were a number of counties which did not cooperate. In fact, they tried to pretend that they had no such thing as a cast vote record. Here's one example. This is from Ashley Gay, who at the time was the Director of Elections and Voter Registration in Coweta County, Georgia. And you can see the response to a request I made for their cast vote records. And it reads, Coweta County received your open records request for the CVR report for the and this happens to be the 2022 primary election. This is 2 years subsequent to 2020. In accordance with OCGA, and they state the statute, Coweta County hereby responds to your request within 3 business days of receipt. Our office has no documents that are responsive to your request. Keep in mind, a cast vote record is generated within minutes by the EMS servers located in each county in Georgia, and it's well known that that's where it comes from. Why would they claim they don't have it? Well, perhaps because they hadn't yet pushed a button to print it, but it only takes several keystrokes to in fact do that. Why would they stand in the way of someone acquiring this cast vote record? That's a good question. And this is not the only county that did it. We won't go into the others in this session today, but you will see more as this comes out as to who tried to stand in the way and prevent folks from looking at a number of different pieces of information, including the cast vote records from some of these counties. Was this indicative of something broader? Is this indicative of a wish not to allow folks to see these? We don't know, but we do think that we will learn more as we go forward about why folks might be unwilling, uncooperative in helping folks find this type of data. Let's go ahead and we'll take one more break, and then we will be back in just a couple minutes.
Every day, your data is being tracked, collected, and sold, often without you even realizing it. Big tech companies control your devices, your apps, and the information you share. From your messages to your browsing habits, everything is being monitored and stored. Over time, we've traded privacy for convenience, and most people don't even question it. But what if you could take that control back? That's where Mark 37 comes in. Mark 37 provides privacy-focused phones, laptops, and tablets designed to give you full control over your digital life. With secure systems, expert support, and simple tools, they make it easier to step away from constant tracking and data collection. Because privacy isn't just a feature, it's a fundamental choice. It's about protecting your data, your freedom, and your future. Take back control of your digital life with Mark 37.
So again, going back a bit in time, we begin to see this pattern of folks trying to block, trying to be uncooperative. One of the counties that has a track record of doing some things that were not helpful is Cherokee. And Cherokee has been pursued for a number of different things, including the cast vote records and other things. They did ultimately provide those to researchers. But there were also cases where citizens there, knowing something didn't feel right, many, hundreds in one case at least, signed petitions and affidavits signifying that they wished to have a specific recount in Cherokee County. And leaders like Richard Jordan, a past magistrate judge from Georgia, and organizations like the Truth Seekers put these things together and prepared to deliver them to the elections director in Cherokee County. This goes back to, again, the same time frame, months after the 2020 election, but still within time frame where people were coming up to speed saying, something is wrong. We need work. We need research here, and we need help from the election department to do it. Let's take a look at this.
I want to welcome everyone to the Board of Elections here a few days before the 24th of May, which is the general election. We have a stack of about 150 sworn affidavits from the electors of 42 precincts, at least 3 in each precinct. And we're here now to meet with Miss Ann Dover, who is the superintendent of the Board of Elections. And we're going to have her sign an acknowledgement of service saying that she has received all of these that are duly sworn before a notary public. And there's just been a lot of work go into this from the electors across the county. And of course, that's the voters, the electors. So let's go in and we'll have a press conference afterwards. This is actually the transmittal letter, front and back. And this reads, demand letter of petition by electors for manual recanvass. So it's got the code sections in. So if you would just sign for that receipt. You're not? Okay, well you want us to stay here?
No, I'll call you when I read over everything.
No, all right, well then I cannot deliver it to you if you can't sign for receipt.
I'm not signing for anything that I've not read over.
Then read it right now.
All you're signing is receipt. If you'll read the document, it's saying that you would.
I'm not arguing with you. You can leave it with me. I'll read everything, then I will sign it, and I will call you and you can come back.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay? I will call you.
So you just watched Ann Dover, the executive director of or supervisor of elections in Cherokee County, refuse to sign even a receipt, signifying that she was getting over 150 affidavits and the statutes that call for those affidavits to be cause for a manual recount in that county. And this is being delivered by a former magistrate judge of Georgia, Richard Jordan. So is this a one-time occurrence? This can't still be happening today, can it? Well, let's take a look.
In Hillsborough County, if an elector, if a voter or a candidate were to request, because the statute's very clear, it says if a request is made by either a candidate or an elector, the grand jury shall investigate. And if there's anything found, it will be prosecuted. So again, my question is, so if an elector, because I know that we have some election integrity people here, wanted to request a grand jury investigation into election fraud here in Hillsborough County, my understanding of the process is that the candidate or elector needs to coordinate with the state attorney and or the clerk of court to get the request to the grand jury. So,
well, a law enforcement agency would need to be involved as well. But if that's something that you're interested in doing, you can feel, I'm not taking service of anything.
No, you're not taking service of anything. This is just a request for a.
That's taking service. So unfortunately, I'm not going to do that. Our office is open at 8:30 on Monday morning.
Okay, all right. Because this is, we're going to hold people accountable.
No, we absolutely are. But
okay. But I can't give this to you now in your hand. Just to take a look at it.
You can take it to the state attorney's office on Monday morning.
On Monday? Oh, okay.
Anybody have any questions about anything else going on in Hillsborough County?
Very interesting, very chucklish. But why would she be so hesitant to accept simply a request? And is this indicative of something more? Well, I guess we're going to see. We do recommend that now is the time for folks to review what they have worked on, because we know that hundreds have worked across Georgia and made various requests. Try to make sure that you are retaining the documentation of such requests. We think that many will be asked for that by, we'll call them authorities for the time being. And we've already seen authorities in Fulton County and elsewhere looking into these matters as we go forward. We suspect that will continue. And we encourage folks to be involved in that and offer help where they can. Make sure that you've retained your documents, make sure you know what was said and by whom it was said, and retain your emails and so forth, so that if asked, you can provide the background information. One of the other things we wanted to share, we talked about folks going back, and one of the folks that was able to actually film something, apparently back in 2020, offered this. And again, this goes back to Michigan. Michigan seems to have a number of different dynamics around it. And we wanted to share this just as an example of if folks hadn't captured this to begin with, we wouldn't have it available today. So let's take a look at this.
Multiple ballots with the very same signature.
This is not an investigation right now.
This is a ballot.
But this is not a time for you to be investigating right now.
Did you find something else?
This is a time for you. No.
I'll offer that this discussion is because these poll workers noted that the signatures on a number of the ballots that they are being asked to count and audit are identical, are the same. And they're calling that out for the one of the election officials. And yet the election official is saying, well, we're not dealing with that right now. Just do the count, which seems surprising. Let's listen.
No. So you need to move forward with the audit so we can get the numbers, so we can see how many ballots are here.
But wait, okay, so when we're done with the audit, there is still the opportunity to challenge the fact that we have multiple ballots with the very same signature.
I don't know if challenge is the right word, but until we get
it, challenging.
We'll go ahead and count the ballots.
Right, we need you to move forward.
But we will separate out and count those and add those in. But there's going to be an asterisk saying these ballots have the same.
Okay. And again, we know that you have a concern with this precinct, and as soon when you get done with the audit part of it, not an investigation, not counting. That's not your role right now, this very minute. So what I need you to do is complete the audit so we can get a number of how many ballots were in this can when you started counting, and we can move forward from there. Okay, so what I need for you guys to do right now is to finish the audit process.
We'll have a
number. We can't
separate them out.
Whether valid or invalid. We'll have
that is not the process right now. The process right now is for you to put them in the piles where they belong for the presidential vote and count the presidential votes. We understand that there is possibly an issue with this precinct. We understand that. But what I need for you to do right now is to finish the presidential race audit, not separate them out. and then we'll move forward from there, okay? But I need you to continue the process right now, please.
You realize that the former state representative has issues with counting ballots that may be invalid.
I understand, but until we get a count, we need that piece done first. We need the audit piece done first because that's why we're here. And we will look at the numbers, okay? And I understand that there may be an issue. And I understand your concerns. So if we can complete the audit piece right now, then we can move forward, okay? Thank you.
Why does it always feel like folks in that position are picking their words very carefully? I'm not sure why that feels that way, but it does. We understand there may be an issue. Well, if there's an issue, you would think that they'd want to investigate that nearly immediately. So we don't know how this turned out, but we suspect that one, the folks that took the video and those that were participated in that discussion will recall this very clearly and will help when asked by the proper authorities, which we think will indeed happen. A number of folks have asked questions regarding the actual declassed documents that the president spoke of on Thursday night's address. Over the coming days, we're going to do a deep dive on each one of the areas to provide some background, look at the document itself, make sure that folks have access to them and know where to go get them, and give you our read as to not only what the document says, but what it might mean in the grand scheme of things. And so we'll be working on that in the coming couple of days. And we invite questions that will help us fill in the blanks for folks where they're having challenge understanding what's going on. But we think that this is simply the first, we'll call it the first volley of declassifications. Something tells me, and I read the posts by others that signify basically the same thing. Very likely that we will see more things come out in the coming days, probably with more substantive findings. It might have more names associated with it, might have more background and deeper understanding of what's happened here. But we believe that this is being scheduled in a way that folks have time to grasp each piece, do their research, gain their understanding, and be ready to accept the next level, if you will, as things are declassed and released. So again, we encourage folks to participate with us. We'll have those releases coming out within the next couple of days, probably between now and Wednesday's broadcast. We'll talk about a few of them during Wednesday's broadcast. And again, we appreciate you being with us. This is one of those times when we and others like us are critical to this process because others are likely not going to bring out the truth. The fake media that Trump has referred to for the last 8 or more years has turned out, in fact, to be fake. They, en masse, declined to even air his address on Thursday night. And so only those who are associated with trying at least to get out truthful news were the ones to air that broadcast, we included. So once again, we appreciate you being with us, and we want you to stay with us as we go forward. We will fulfill the commitments we've made. We will always try to get out the truth to you and our best thoughts and analysis as to what's coming out. One last thing to take us out today. There was a very interesting post from an account called Il Donaldo, one of the accounts that stood up on Twitter after the president had originally been canceled some years ago. And they posted this entitled, "Now we're going to fly over, we're going to fly over harder." Here we go. Just have to show that one more time.